So now the last step is to take common patterns in our project and replace them with reusable code modules. And we can do that with Mixins. So Mixins are a smart way of reusing our code because instead of having to rewrite a lot of the common properties or tedious bits of CSS in our project, we can write them once in a Mixin, then let SAS write them dynamically once we include them. And what's also great about creating SAS Mixins is that we can reuse them on other projects if we want. Usually, we'll want to write Mixins that make use of arguments to dynamically alter CSS values, instead of ones that just repeat blocks of code, which, depending on how we write them, may cause some extra bloat in the CSS output. So first, inside the base directory, I'm going to create a new partial that will contain our Mixins. So let's call it _mixins.scss. And now let's go ahead and import our new partial inside our index.scss partial. So I'll simply copy one of the imports, and we're going to import our Mixins partial right after the variables and right before the base styles. So I'll replace the variable's partial name with the new one, Mixins. All right, so now we'll go ahead and save our index partial and close it out. So first, in our Mixin partial, let's create a Mixin that writes our font face declarations. So for instance, let's open up our components directory and the typography partial. And as we can see, we're importing a font, and we're using this font for our main heading. So if we're importing a few fonts in our project, even having to copy the font face rules and change the font families and file names can be pretty tedious. So this will be a great example of how Mixins can help us out. So before we build our Mixin, let's open up our variables partial. And like we did for our image asset path, let's create a path for our fonts. So right beneath the path image variable, let's declare a new variable, and we'll call it path-font. And as the value, we're going to write the path to our fonts directory, which is simply called fonts. Right, so let's save our variables partial. And back in our Mixins partial, let's add a comment telling us that this is for web fonts. And we're going to write our Mixin by typing @Mixin, and let's call it font-face. And then we're going to add a set of parentheses and a set of curly braces. So inside our parentheses, the Mixin will accept two arguments. One will be the font family, and the other will be the file name. So let's go ahead and write the arguments for those. First, we're going to create the one for the font family. So let's create the variable argument family. Then we'll write a comma. And right after that, we'll create the one for file, which we'll simply call file. Okay, so what we'll do next is go over to the typography partial. And I'm going to copy the entire font face rule and paste it inside our new Mixin. So go ahead and select it and cut it. I'll save this. Then we'll just go ahead and paste it right inside the font face Mixin. All right, so first we'll get rid of the hard-coded abolition regular font family value. And as the font family property, we're going to pass this family variable. So I'll just go ahead and copy it and paste it in as the value. And next, we're going to make dynamic paths with that variable we just created. So once again, since our font assets path is a string, we'll need to use interpolation to pass the path font variable in the URLs, just like we did with our image assets. All right, so first, let me select the first path here and delete it. And we're going to use interpolation syntax. So we're going to write hash, set of curly braces, then inside the curly braces, define the path font variable. And now we'll need to do the same for our font file variable. So web font file names are usually suffixed with web font, so we'll keep that in here. That way we won't have to retype it. So what I'll do is select abolition-regular and the file name, delete it, and replace it with our new variable. So once again, we'll type hash, curly braces, Then inside the curly braces, we're going to pass that file variable. All right, so let me go ahead and copy the two variables we just wrote. Then I'm going to replace the three values below with our variables. So first, we'll do it for our embedded open type format. Right below that, we'll do it for our WAF format. And finally, the true type format. All right, so let's go ahead and save it. And now whenever we include this mixin in a rule, it will pass the font family name we define as the font family value, then pass the file name we define and all the source values. So now we can go back to our typography partial and include our new font face mixin. So to do that, I'll type @include, followed by the mixin name, which is font-face, then our set of parentheses and a semicolon. So now inside the parentheses as the argument, let's go ahead and pass the font family name and the file name. So first, I'm going to pass the abolition regular font family as the font family value. So we'll type abolition regular and make sure it's surrounded by quotes. Then we'll add a comma and then we'll type the file name, which is abolition-regular. All right, so let's save and compile our partial. And if we bring up our CSS output, as you can see, the mixin outputs our abolition regular font face rule. So now anytime we need to import a font, we can simply include our font face mixin and the new font's name, and SAS will take care of the rest for us.